Hello and welcome to the Syndicated Vomit Podcast, an extension of the Vomit series of podcast. I'm your host, Mac Taylor. And guys, we're continuing on this more phenomenal journey, this motherfucking journey we've been going on as we talk about Power Rangers Season 1, Episodes 13 through 16. Yeah, that was a lot to quickly say. It has been interesting going back and doing this. It's been a couple of years since I've visited Mighty Morphin. And it's a lot of episodes. It is, guys. We're going to get some jet lag, I'm sure. But the fact that we're only doing this in 4-episode intervals and like once a day kind of deal, it's not as big of a task. But when you try to binge this like in a week or two, oh boy. Yeah. It hurts. So let's go ahead. Let's dive right in. Let's get started here with episode 13, Peace, Love, and Woe. Not a bad title. Like I said, Power Rangers has pretty decent episode titles so far, unlike the real world, which has very long episode titles. But they got better at that, though. But like those first few, man, oh boy. So we start off Bulk skateboarding through Ernie's shop and like a fucking dickhole. He skateboards right into Ernie's cake. There's always a cake. Like Ernie should just stop making cakes for things because Bulk always ends up ruining the cake. I don't think anyone's ever eaten a cake at Ernie's. I think it's always just been destroyed. We don't even know if they taste good. The cakes are just always, do they eat them afterwards or is it just like, well, that was a thing we did? So we get, Rita's like, I want Madam Woe. And we're like, who the fuck is Madam Woe? And they're like, oh, not Madam Woe. And I'm like, who is Madam Woe? Like, they really build up Madam Woe as a thing. But as we'll see, it's only a 1-episode deal. But, like, everyone acts like it's going to be such a crazy thing to talk about Madam Woe. And then Zach's asking Billy if he's going to, try to ask a girl to this dance. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I'm just not into anyone right now. And he's like, oh, come on. You'll find a girl. You'll get a girl. And he bumps into a nerd girl. And, they start playing the music in the background. Like, they're being a little awkward to each other. And they don't really know what to say. But, like, they're clearly, like, in love. Like, there's some, like, fuck me vibes going on here. Like, it's kind of cute. Even though, what happened to the deaf girl? They bonded, and now we got this girl. I don't even think we see this girl again. Her name's Marge, though, by the way, and that's not a name that most younger girls have, so that was odd. Like Marge is reserved for The Simpsons, you know what I'm saying? And, like, people over 90. But that's her name, and they both graduated from the Accelerated Baby Genius program. And I'm like, Baby Genius is like, oh man, that's a terrible movie. Don't remind me of that movie. You couldn't have graduated from like Spy Kids school. Like, does it have to be like that shitty movie, Baby Geniuses? And they do a big emphasis. She's like, this is my favorite necklace. It's very important to me. And we're like, that's gonna come up later. So Madam Woe is summoned, and basically she has, like, weather control powers, and she's, like, this very Sentai villain-looking lady with these long fingernails and these, like, pure white eyes. Not a bad design, honestly. But she's not, like, a monster that Rita creates. She's, like, a being in the world that Rita just asks a favor of, but, like, she still recognizes her as Empress Rita. Not exactly sure, but like they talk about in the past, she's been a big deal. But we've also seen other monsters of the week who have been big deals that the Rangers quickly just kind of dispose of. But anyway, nevertheless, they're trying to be like, Madam Woe, she's a big fucking deal. And she's not really a big deal, but we'll talk about it. So Madam Woe goes to capture the Power Rangers, but she captures Marge instead. Because for some reason she thinks more like, you'd think though, when Rita was like, get the Power Rangers, she'd be like, okay, you may not know who they are. Here's what they look like. Like, look through my telescope. Those are the Power Rangers. Like, why would you expect her just to be like, no, they are unmorphed? A little sloppy job on Rita's part. But she captures Marge and leaves the necklace behind. Again, I said, remember that necklace. So Billy finds it, and the putties arrive, and Billy is not a great fighter yet. Like, he's the weakest link as far as fighting ability goes within the group at the moment. So he gets rocked by putties. But the other Rangers arrive to help. And, like, you know, they do some pretty decent fight choreography. But there's this where Trini, like, sidekicks a putty. And instead of just her doing 3 sidekicks, she does 1 sidekick, and they play that same footage 3 times. And it's very easy to tell it's the exact same footage looped, because it looks like her foot starts, like, if you were to sidekick 3 times and run that straight through, you would see your foot go back down, then back up. Like, it would be a consistent motion. This one, it just very clearly just she starts from the same position every time, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's definitely just the same footage looped. It looked weird, and I'm like, why did you do that? You could have just had Thoi Trang kick 3 times. You know what I mean? Like, it felt unnecessary to me. Did it save? I guess it saved a couple of seconds of the film reel, and maybe that was, you know, what they had to work with. Like, maybe they were shooting on ends, like, you know, Lloyd Kaufman Troma style, and they had to fucking, like, we only have like 7 seconds, so we only get 1 kick. I don't know. It felt. Granted, I have the privilege of being in the digital age. You don't have to worry about, you know, as long as you don't fill up the memory card, you don't have to worry about shoot time. But I don't know. It felt a little weird, like unnecessarily goofy. And then, but there was a fun moment where a putty rolls a barrel, and like Donkey Kong style, and Kimberly has to jump over. So I was like. It was that weird, like, Leo DiCaprio moment where you're snapping at the screen and you're like, Donkey Kong! It's Donkey Kong! You know, arcades were decent in the early 90s, so, you know, definitely there were some kids at home that probably also was like, it's Donkey Kong! But with Power Rangers! Which, wouldn't that be a fun arcade machine? It's Donkey Kong just with Power Rangers. You can make that for a phone nowadays, right? So Zordon calls them back, gives them all the exposition about Madame Woe. And he's like, yeah, you can combine your power coins and transfer all your Ranger powers to one of you, and then that'll defeat Madame Woe. And I'm like, okay, again, Zordon, we could have done this whole time. Like that time when Jason was just getting his ass whooped by Goldar alone. You could have just sent him the power coins, and then he could have had all the powers, and he wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't have had to worry about other people getting it. Like, why? Why do we wait until shit hits the fan to talk about things we could have done earlier? But nevertheless, that's what they need to do. So they morph in action and are immediately captured in Madame Woe's fucking head gem thing where Marge is. So they run into Marge. And then there's, like, tentacles, and I'm like, ooh, anytime Japanese tentacles are in place, someone could get fucked. So, like, let's be careful with this footage. And then, after she beats them up with those, she squirts water all over them. So, again, a little darkly perverted. But they all combine their power coins and give the power to Billy, who still gets his ass beat by Madame Woe for a minute because she starts instant transmissioning. I'm like, this isn't Dragon Ball Z. Stop, cheaply appearing in random places. And she's like, whoa, I'm over here. Whoa, I'm over here. And it's like, oh, okay, fuck you. Stop doing that. But he ends up taking her gem off her head, and all of her powers are going away. The Rangers come out. They beat the fuck out of her, put the power weapons together and kill her with that. And we don't get that's yet another monster defeated without the Megazord. It's happened with the Terratoad and Pudgy Pig. It's happened a few times lately that they haven't had to use the Megazord to beat the monster. So it's kind of come to a point like I'm kind of missing the Megazord. Like maybe we should get the Megazord more, Like, I know it's going to happen a lot in the future, and I'm going to be like, all right, enough with the damn Megazord. But, it's something that right now I'm missing a little bit. So then afterwards, Billy's talking to Marge, and he's like, oh, I heard you got saved by the Power Rangers. And she's like, yeah, that blue one. I love that guy. And we know it's him, but it's like a Superman Lois Lane thing where it's like Clark's in love with Lois, but Lois is in love with Superman. Like, they could have really made an arc out of that, even though it's just the same thing as Superman. They could have done something where, like, Billy is always after Marge. Marge wants the Blue Ranger, but the Blue Ranger is Billy, but he can't tell her his identity, so there's this odd sexual tension all the time. They could have totally done that, but there's no continuity in early Power Rangers, so people just fucking disappear all the time. Again, I know that was on purpose, but we could have had so much more. Mighty Morphin could have been so much better on a rewatch if there was more continuity. That's all I'm saying. But nevertheless, he gives her necklace back. They have a cute little moment. Zach and Jason lament that they don't have any women. Then Bulk and Skull show up, and Ernie's like, you gotta pay me for that last cake. And Bulk apparently keeps his money in his sock, and his feet are like super dirty. And I'm like, do you shower, bro? Like, why are your feet that dirty? And he hands Ernie the money, and then Ernie passes out from the smell and lands in a cake. So we're out 2 cakes. Again, I don't think anyone ever eats the cake. And then, even though he falls in the cake, he's like, let's dance. And it was like a very footloose ending, where it's like, hey, everybody, let's dance. And then they all dance. But it was less Soul Train this time and more just extremely white. And that ends that episode and brings us in episode 14, Foul Play in the Sky, which is another good episode title. Because it actually has a lot to do with what the episode entails, too. It isn't just a pun. Although, when I first thought foul play, I thought we were going to get another chicken. But it's not. So basically, Kimberly is going flying with her Uncle Steve. We're meeting get more of their family members. And we get like a rare, like Jason and Zach are talking about girls. Like Zach goes up to crush on a girl named Angela, and he's like, hey, how's it going? And she's like, get lost. And it's like, ooh, shit, like that's a lot of aggression. But Jason's actually wearing a black tank top. Like, he's not wearing any red. That's the first time, I think, that I've noticed a Ranger not wearing their Ranger color, or at least something. Like, I know Billy just wears a lot of denim, and that's close enough to blue. But, yeah, like Jason was wearing black. And I was like, this isn't Zeo. Like, you're not the Gold Ranger. You can't just go wearing black. Maybe that was a sign, like, hey, if you look back, Jason's wearing black. We knew he was going to be the Gold Ranger the whole time, which they fucking didn't know, because they didn't know that they were going to make Zeo. But, we'll talk more about that later. But I thought that was a fun little thing. Like, I looked, I'm like, he's not wearing red. Blasphemy. So basically, Rita's plan in this episode is she wants to put a sleeping potion on Uncle Steve so that Kimberly's in peril in an airplane. And while that's happening, she'll send down the Snizzard, and they'll be so distracted by the Kimberly thing, they won't be able to stop the Snizzard. Which is actually a really good plan. Like, this is the first time that Rita's actually done something fairly intelligent. Bulk and Skull, they're like, I've always wanted to fly. Skull's like, yeah, my teacher said I was always an airhead. So this is a fun little joke there. I was like, all right, like Bulk and Skull are starting to get more screen time because they swindle their way into going with, like, Kim, can we come? She's like, it's a tiny plane, and Uncle Steve's like, oh yeah, your friends can come. I'm like, thanks, Uncle Steve, and he's like, you can just call me Steve. But like, we're getting more Bulk and Skull because I think when the show was in conception, they had thought that we were gonna root against these guys, and they were just gonna keep them as the bullies that got comeuppance, which still happens a lot in this season. But I think they're starting to realize around this time that Bulk and Skull are actually really popular with the fans, and like myself included. Like, I love Bulk and Skull because they're so naive that their bullyishness and stupidity just comes off as like, we can look past it. It's a lot like Michael and Dwight in The Office. They do a lot of fucked up shit, but it's like, we're okay with them because, one, they always get comeuppance for shit, and two, like, they're like our losers. Like, no one else can mess with them but us. You know what I'm saying? And that's how we feel about Bulk and Skull for sure. So I'm glad they're getting more screen time other than physical comedy all the time. Like, even though it does happen a lot in this, they're getting more to do than just bully the Rangers. Bulk and Skull are already like, I hope this plane doesn't crash, and go get more of that later. So they show some footage of the Snizzard, who's like a giant snake with snakes for him, lots of snake stuff, and he has a cobra bow. So he has a bow that shoots out cobras. I'm like, that's badass. Like, gone are the days of chunky chicken with the scissors. We got a snake that has snakes for arms that shoots other snakes out of a bow and arrow. That's fucking awesome. Like, thumbs up for the Snizzard, who also, fun fact, is voiced by Bryan Cranston. I'm like, wow, Power Rangers. First, you got your theme song sang by Chuck Lorre, who went on to make 2.5 Men and Big Bang Theory, and then you get Snizzard voiced by fucking Breaking Bad Bryan Cranston. So like, they're Uncle Steve's flying around, and they're flying over the mountains, and Kimberly's like, I know those mountains, and they flash back to the pilot. Now, I know that these episodes were made to be shown out of order, and like, maybe some people didn't see the pilot that are watching this episode and things like that. But did we need to flash back to the pilot 13 episodes into the run? Really, do we need to flash back to the pilot at all in Season 1? I think the only time a flashback to Season 1 works in the story is if Kimberly's ready to leave the group. Like, later in Season 3, when Kimberly goes to leave the Power Rangers, flash back to the pilot and reminisce. That works. That emotionally makes sense. But this, a little dumb. Especially since I watched these 13 episodes in a row. I'm like, it's been fucking like a couple days for me. Why am I already seeing flashbacks of the pilot? It's kind of weird. And like I said, I understand the thought process of they're not run, probably weren't run in order after they ran the first time. And also, like, not everyone probably watched that pilot. There were some kids that were probably like, oh, wow, we could see some backstory, not knowing that, there was a pilot about it. But for me, it took me out of it a little bit. So Steve, the sleeping potion that Squat put in his soda is already taking effect. So Bulk and Skull are freaking out because Steve's starting to pass out. And he's like, oh, I'm getting dizzy. And Skull's like, what'd he say? Bulk's like, he said he's getting dizzy. And he's kind of look for a second and like, dizzy? Good. Those two, believe their names are Paul Scheer and Jason Narvey, play Bulk and Skull respectively. They do such a good job because they were young when they got this show. And for two, like, they're the best actors in the whole show. Like, and I love the Power Rangers. I do. And I love Jason. I love all the OGs. But they're not great at emoting. And they're not really that good of actors, except I think the best actor in the Power Ranger group is Amy Jo Johnson. But even then, they're very green. They're very new to the business, I think. They still have a lot to learn about character studies and all that. But Paul Scheer and Jason Narvey just fucking get Bulk and Skull. And they're two demanding roles because there's a lot of physical gags and, stunts and stuff. And a lot of just, like, comedy, physical comedy or, like, body language comedy. And, it can be overdone or oversold. And, like, most of the time, they nail it. And like this is that perfect thing of like I said, they have that little beat that they look at each other and then go into the screaming gag. Like it's timed out very well, especially for the target audience that they're going for. But even for me, I laugh sometimes at the shit they do. It's very good. Like I said, I think they're the best actors in the show, and I think it's why I love them so much. I think they're the most believable in that role. And I think they must have had so much fun filming all these scenes and stuff together. They must have really, like, bonded over it. So anyway, Steve passes out. And Kim tries to figure it out. And Bulk and Skull faint when they realize Steve faints. Now Kim's all alone calling Zordon, trying to figure out how to land a goddamn plane, airplane style. So the Rangers... they get sent to Snizzard because, that's a problem. And Zordon's like, oh, I should have saw this coming. Now Rita's made this plan, and now, we have no one to send to Kimberly. And she's running low on fuel. But the Rangers morph. They're fighting Snizzard. He's whipping their asses. Gets them all wrapped up in snakes. And he's about to finish them off. But Alpha is guiding Kim out, but he's like, oh no, aye. And she's like, what do you mean, aye? I'm trying to land a plane. He's like, oh, the Rangers, they're in trouble. It's like, don't tell her the bad news. She's trying to land a plane. Don't make her nervous. So the Cobras that are wrapped in the Rangers are draining the energy. And there's a fun gag where Bulk and Skull, they wake up, realize, like, oh, what's happening? And Bulk's like, oh, Kimberly's flying the plane. And then they look at each other like, Kimberly's flying the plane! And then they pass out again. That was fun. That was a fun little... again, good timing. So Kim ends up landing the plane. And the tower's like, plane, where are you landing? Please respond. And she's like, I need an ambulance. And I'm like, all right, well, when we get you guys out of there, please explain why you landed a plane here. And then Uncle Steve wakes up. And she's like, yeah, make sure Bulk and Skull are good. I gotta go, bye. And she runs off into the rocks and morphs in action to fight Snizzard. And her power bow, she shoots it and breaks the Cobra bow. And I didn't know the Cobra bow was that weak. Kim fucking saves the day. Twice. Lands the plane and saves everybody, then comes and destroys the Cobra bow and saves all 4 of the Power Rangers. So, go Kim. Between this and the Terror Toad episode, Kim really gets a lot of shining moments. Like from, Jason was, the guy who was kind of having the moments. And then, Billy got to have a couple of moments. And now Kim. And it's about time that Trini and Zach get their moments soon, too. And so he's like, I'll send out my tonsil snakes. And I'm like, tonsil snakes? Sounds a little gross. But the power bow destroys those. And apparently Snizzard has like a golden apple on his head, which is a terrible design. And she shoots the apple with the bow, and fucking he blows up and he's dead. So again, no Megazord to defeat the villain of the week. And then Bulk and Skull wake up and run away. They're like, oh my god, we're safe. We're on the ground. And this guy's flirting with Kim like, oh, you landed a plane. That's very attractive. And, Jason and Zach are making fun of that because they have no girls. They have no other things to attend to. They couldn't get away without doing something dropping on Bulk and Skull, so Ernie drops shakes on them. Again, not prompted. They didn't do anything wrong in this episode. They just went with Kim on the plane and almost died and then got chicks poured on them. So again, it was a little mean-spirited. I think we should move to the point where we're not as much of dicks to Bulk and Skull, but Again, in the next episode, they completely go backwards, but sometimes they have redeeming qualities in the beginning. Later on, they have a lot of redeeming qualities. So that's going to take us in episode 15, The Dark Warrior, which sounds a lot cooler than it ended up being, so don't get too excited about Dark Warrior. Basically, Billy wants to be a better fighter, because like I said, he still is. Like, without the 5 power coin thing, he wouldn't have been so cool in the other episode. Like, he wants to try to, Jason is the badass karate guy, and he wants to learn from Jason more. And Bulk and Skull shake him down for change. And then Trini comes and bonks him on the head and saves him. So he's like, great, I can't even defend myself against Bulk and Skull. She's like, well, my Uncle Howard's coming into town. He's a renowned scientist. And Jason's like, he's also a super famous karate instructor. And Billy's like, wow, a karate scientist? And I'm like, Uncle Howard karate scientist sounds like a badass daytime television show. Stay tuned for the episode of Uncle Howard, karate scientist. Like, that, it's like Bill Nye that fucking does, like, ninja kicks. Like, fuck yeah, I would watch that show. And meanwhile, Rita brings out the Dark Warrior, who basically looks like the design of a putty with, like, a little more, like, armor. Like, it just looks like a more badass It should have been just called a Dark Putty or a Super Putty or something like that. I don't think it really needed to be called a Dark Warrior. It sounds way cooler than it is. So Uncle Howard arrives and loses his invisibility potion, which is the world-renowned thing that he's doing right now. And Ernie takes it thinking it's part of his bar stuff, which you shouldn't think a random green liquid is part of your thing. Like, if you don't recognize it, like, of course it's not yours. But Uncle Howard's like, well, Billy, I'm going to teach you all sorts of karate while also sharpening your mind. So there's, like, no question. He's immediately taking Billy under his wing. So they go off to do that shit. Meanwhile, Babu and Squat go to his lab looking for his stuff and drink a couple of things, and Goldar's like, you don't just drink things without seeing what they are. And Goldar's voice is like halfway there. Like, he starts to sound like Goldar and then goes back to the deeper voice, and I'm like, just fucking pick one, Like, I think the voice actors, they should do another take in the recording studio. Meanwhile, the putties show up, and Howard's doing his thing, but the putties kidnap him ultimately. And he's like, remember what you learned, Billy? And I'm like, it's been an hour. How much did you teach him in that hour? You know what I'm saying? Like, it'd be different if he'd spent, like, we had a montage of them, like, training for, like, a week or two. But, like, he literally just got there. Remember your training? What training? I know it's a 20-minute episode, but we couldn't have done a 2-parter here? So, the Dark Warrior straps Uncle Howard to a bomb, and I'm like, okay. He doesn't even have his own cool powers, he just has a bomb? Like, he's just basically a die-hard villain? And then he sends a note in black balloons that pop, and they're like, oh no, they have Uncle Howard. But I'm like, balloons, bombs and balloons, that's all you got? Snizzard had a cobra bow. And this douchebag's got balloons. So they go to Zordon to get the exposition. And then they go to it, they're like, oh no, putties. And they fight Putties and Goldar, and Zordon's like, no, wait, that's actually a trap. Get back over here. And they're like, okay. So they come back there. So, like, they just keep getting, like, come here and do this. No, actually go over here and do this. Like, I'm like, quit transporting them all around. Just fucking pick where they gotta go and send them there the first time. You have a viewing globe. You should know what traps are. And so they get to Uncle Howard, and he's like, Billy, use your karate training to disarm the bomb. And I'm like, first of all, like I said, you only had an hour with him. Second, how does karate training help you disarm a bomb? That doesn't make any sense. But it works, because Billy cuts the right wire, and the bomb doesn't go off. And I'm like, what is this? Like, we've had a couple of good episodes. But this episode, I like the Uncle Howard stuff, but the villain stuff and some of the choices are just fucking lame. So they morph into action, have a very, very quick scuffle, and Rito grows her monster. And he has a sickle, I just noticed, that he never used until he was a big monster. And so they get the Megazord, and he gets a few hits with the sickle, but the Power Slash takes us home because you can't beat the Power Sword. And so they use the Megazord on the Dark Warrior. Terror Toad and Snizzard were way cooler, but he gets the Megazord. So we get back to the human stuff. Billy gets his yellow belt. And again, it's only been like a couple of days. But, he moved up fast in rankings because all that quick 1 hour training from Uncle Howard. And then Bulk and Skull come to mess with them. And Howard turns invisible with his potion and whoops up on their aces. And that ends that episode and brings us into the last episode we're going to be talking about for today's podcast. Episode 16, So Witching Blazes. So Squat shows up in the middle of the night because he just does that all the time. Which, why couldn't you just, again, if you're a villain trying to take over the world, why don't you just have them kill the Power Rangers into sleep? Like, take a victory when you can get a victory, right? But instead, he just switches the wires on Billy's invention. And basically the invention he made is a telepathic, like, mind-reading machine. And he tries to test it out with Kimberly, and they end up switching bodies. So Freaky Friday, Billy and Kim are now switched, and there's a fun little moment where Billy's in Kim's body, so she has to put the glasses on. And I'm like, what a fun little acting exercise for them to, like, have to play each other, essentially. It's kind of fun. So Bulk and Skull are outside, and Bulk's like, did you hear that? Skull's like, yeah. That was a dog. He's like, not the dog, you idiot. What Billy said. It's a mind-reading machine. So after Billy and Kim go to try to figure out how to switch back, Bulk and Skull go to use the machine, and for some reason, when they turn it on, it, like, electrocutes them. Like, with Billy and Kim, it was like, wah, 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 and then they're fine. With Bulk and Skull, it's like, and they're like, I'm like, why does it always just hurt them? And so they switch bodies, and like I said, much more fun because they're better actors playing each other. They do a lot better job. Like, Bulk and Skull's body, like, puts the jacket and flight cap on. And, Bulk's and Skull's and Bulk's body, chewing the gum and doing the laugh. It's a lot of fun. So Rita's monster she sends in is a genie who looks like Anubis. So it's an Anubis genie. Not Chunky Chicken levels of bad, but not Terror Toad levels of good. And we get more gags with them in each other's bodies, like Billy trying to put on makeup in Kim's body and just looks like a mess. Kim is trying to teach a kid how to work a computer, and Billy's trying to make a souffle. And Kim blows up the computer, and Billy blows up the souffle, but it's really just like the effects done with like a balloon that they aired up, and it's had cheese sauce on it. Like, that was the cheese souffle explosion. But, cool practical effect there. But I was like, that's a balloon. So they're clearly screwing each other's lives up. Meanwhile, Bulk in Skull's body is eating these gigantic subs. And he has a fun little line where he's like, it's scarfing time. And I was like, oh, man, I'm using that next time I'm, like, super hungry with a group of friends. I'm like, hey, guys, it's scarfing time. Like, oh, man, I can't wait to use that line. So Zordon summons the kids, gives the exposition. Then the putties arrive. They morph into action. And they don't make a thing. Like, I thought, since we made a thing earlier, that when everybody morphs, Billy and Kimberly are going to have trouble fighting in each other's ranger forms because they're used to their own. Like if Billy goes to pull the lance and because he's in Kim's body, pulls the bow and he's like, oh shit, right, it's a bow. How do I use it? Or like Kim with the power lance, or even like their Zords and things like that. But there are zero, besides like a quick like, oh yeah, right, I'm actually not Kim, I'm Billy. Other than that, there's no mention of it. And I thought it was kind of a wasted opportunity. If you're going to make a body switching episode and the Rangers got to morph while switched bodies, there should be some confusion on how to use each other's weapons and shit. But there wasn't. I was like, it's kind of a letdown. But so they go to fight Goldar, who just fucks up Jason. And Zordon's like, no, it's a diversion. Go get the genie. And I'm like, quit just sending them places. Like, or at least send, like, a couple Rangers here and a couple Rangers here. Like, you don't have to send all 5 over here. And they're like, oh, wait, that's not the problem. This is the problem. And then the genie throws his cobwebs on him. And, which I don't know why a genie has cobweb shooting abilities. But he throws cobwebs on him, and they're like, oh no, cobwebs, the one weakness. And then they get sent back to Zordon. He's like, that guy was tough, wasn't he? And they're like, sure was. And I'm like, why are you sending him back? Keep him fighting. They're like, you need to combine your powers again. And when they arrive, Rita just starts shooting lightning at him. Like, why hasn't she done that before? Like, if Rita is so incredibly powerful, why hasn't she just killed the Rangers? Why is she relying on clay monsters? I know you have to extend the show out again. I know there's answers to all these questions, but I'm just saying, what kind of deep dive podcast would this... Why would I talk about every episode of Power Rangers if I wasn't going to point out the stuff that's annoying on top of the stuff that's cool? You know what I'm saying? So, Rita doesn't fuck around. She makes the genie big. And so we get Megazord. And they're like, oh... the genie just starts beating up the Megazord. They're like, oh yeah, right, you need to destroy the lamp to kill the genie. So Alpha destroys the genie right before the genie is about to drill into the Megazord's face, which would have been an interesting scene. And it just disappears, and it's gone. No power slash, no defeating of it. We just fucking makes it disappear. Kind of an odd way to end it, you know? And so we get back to the machine where everyone's going to do the switchback stuff. And this is when you really see how kind of, like, poorly it's made. Like, it's like a cardboard wall with, like, a little box and with wires in it. Like, it's not really a super well, like, but again, they're on a budget. But it's just cardboard. And they switch back, and then they switch Bulk and Skull back. And Skull's like, hey, Billy, can I borrow your brain for my math test coming up? And everyone's like, yeah, and then they do that, that random cutaway laughing thing again. And I'm like, I wish they'd stop doing that. But nevertheless, that is the 4 episodes we're talking about today. Stay tuned next time. We talk about episodes 17 through 20. I am enjoying going on this journey with you guys, and I hope you've enjoyed going on it with me as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and leave comments down below. What are your thoughts on Power Rangers Season 1? What are your thoughts on this podcast? What would you like to see coming up? Guys, I got so many videos coming out in 2021, my head's spinning. And I'm glad that we're all here doing this together. 2021 was a trip. Now we're getting back up and trying to pick up those motherfucking pieces. Like I said, don't forget to do all that business. Stay safe, and most importantly, guys, stay nerdy. I'm out of here.